Hello and welcome to the first ever Teen Bake-Along. I'm Marilyn, your new teen librarian, and our January recipe is fresh baked bread. This particular recipe is super basic, super easy. It's an excellent if you've never made bread before. It's a really good place to start. You also won't need any special tools. In your kit there should be marked what kind of tools you'll need. And you can really use just about anything you've got, which is the nice thing about bread. You can get a bunch of fancy tools to do it, but as long as you've got something like, as long as you've got a fork to mix some dry stuff together and then a spoon to mix the dry and the wet stuff together, you're golden. So let's get started. These are all the ingredients and tools that you will need. Obviously all the ingredients you should be able to find in your kit, but if you've got a fork, any kind of fork, it doesn't have to be a big fancy fork, and any kind of spoon, could be like a wooden spoon, could be like a big spoon, it all depends. When you're making bread, as long as you've got something to mix it with, you could theoretically just use your hand, but that would get pretty sticky pretty fast. So maybe start with some sort of large spoon, wooden spoon, what have you. If you've got a mixer, of course you can use that too. But the good thing about this recipe and bread in general is the fact that you don't have to have any really fancy tools to do it, which is what I'll be showing you today. So the first thing we're going to do is bloom the yeast, and you'll see why we call it bloom once we're actually finished doing it. So to do that, you put in your yeast into a large bowl, as well as that extra half teaspoon of sugar. Obviously you can see mine's in like a coffee lid, yours probably isn't. And then, once you've got all that, you add in your warm water. Put it on in there, take a fork, stir it up just a little bit. And now we just let it hang out. So you're gonna let it stand until you see some bubbles on the surface. That's how we know that the yeast is alive, because it is alive, but it can die if you have it for too long. So now we'll just let that hang out and smell it. It smells pretty darn good. I know it might seem strange to just want to smell this like bowl of foamy water, but it really does smell delicious. Now while that is blooming, we'll put that on off to the side here. Take the rest of your sugar, which is that 3 tablespoons, put it into your flour. Put in your salt. Take your fork and just mix that all together. Okay, flour won't look any different, but there's sugar and salt in there, I promise. So now we're just gonna wait for that yeast to come together, and once it has, then we will be back. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes and that yeast is looking real good. If you watch it while it blooms, you can actually see little bubbles coming up. You might be able to see them a little bit through here too, which is just really, I think it's really cool, but I'm also a complete baking nerd, hence why I'm doing a baking program. But maybe you're a baking nerd too, or maybe by the end of this, you will be a baking nerd. Either way, our yeast is ready, so now we're going to move on to our next steps for the bread. Okay, so now that our yeast is all bloomed, we're going to take our oil, pour that on into our yeast, try and shake it out a little bit. There we go. Okay, now stir it. This is where you can use a spoon. You don't need to worry about your fork or anything here. Apologies in advance for the loud noise. Plastic bowls, really any kind of bowl is just gonna make a loud noise. Now this is the only really quote-unquote tricky part for bread. You don't necessarily want to add all of the flour at one time, so you're going to kind of add it a little bit at a time. I'm using a cup measurer, but you can just take your bag and dump in a little bit. There we go. So I'm doing about a cup here, and then stir that in. And then a little more. Okay, you can see how it's kind of stopping being a completely goopy mess and actually really coming together to form a dough. Keep on going though. You don't want to do any handwork until it's a little bit more together. Like this is still too liquidy. There we go. Coming together a little bit more. We want this to be a soft dough, but not so sticky that it kind of runs through our hands. The more bread you make, the better you'll get at recognizing when a dough is ready to be worked with, either by kneading or, if you've got a fancy mixer, using a dough hook. Okay, I reached a point where the flour is no longer really easily mixing into the dough, so I'm going to move on to the kneading stage. Also, warning, your hands are going to get real dirty. So the first thing you want to do, let's adjust this a little bit. There we go. First thing you want to do is flour your surface. I can see this here. There we go. First thing you want to do is flour your work surface. Now this could be a cutting board, this could be a counter, whatever it is that you've got, you just need a flat area on which to knead dough. Try and get out as much as that as you can. Ideally, if you've got a rubber spatula, you can just go through it with that. Okay. You can see this is super wet and shaggy. That's fine. That's about what we're going to start with. So now we knead. And this is going to take about 8 or 10 minutes, which is what the recipe says. So just go. And I'll show you how you do it. So you've got this big kind of mass, or at least how I do it. Fold it over, press it, press, fold. I do a rotate too. If you've ever seen the Great British Bake Off, you've probably seen them like slap their bread around. That's doable. I've never done it because I can't imagine just throwing my bread about. There you go. So you kind of fold it over, press it, rotate it, fold, press. Do not be afraid to flour the dough some more or to flour your hands because they will be sticky. If it starts sticking to the surface, obviously, just give that another little spread. This is where I'd recommend put on a video. I mean, not like right now. Well, maybe right now. We'll do a little video break right here. Go watch something fun while you knead this dough. Fun science fact, the reason we have to knead the dough is because we are developing the gluten in the bread. That's where, bread having gluten comes from. We want it to be nice and strong so that the bread has structure. So if you don't develop that gluten, it doesn't rise as well. You might notice, as I am noticing, that even though I have to keep stopping because the bread is getting sticky, you can kind of see it when you push it out of shape, trying to move back to its original shape. How it's not nearly as shaggy as it was when we started. Maybe we'll just try. No, yeah. I don't know. I'll have to talk to the Great British Bake Off people. I'm not sure how well that's working. You might also be like me and be annoyed when it keeps getting sticky on you. But persevere. There is bread at the end of this. Bread that is all yours. You are the master of it. It is your bread. It's a thing that did not exist in the world until you made it. There we go. You might be able to see it's getting a little bit smoother. There we go. It's not falling as much as it was. Not behaving as a liquid as much as it had been. Okay, so once you've made enough bread, you'll probably be able to just tell when it's ready. I've seen some videos where if you push on it and it bounces back. Oh, it kind of does, but not quite. So if you're not sure if it's ready or not, tear off a little bit of it. It'll be kind of sticky, I guess, here. Come on now. You're going to try something called the window pane test. That's where you take a little lump of dough and you spread it out. There we go. See how it's tearing right there? Maybe. See how it's tearing right there? So that means it's not ready yet. You essentially, with the window pane test, want to be able to tear that little chunk or pull on it to try and make like a window pane. And if it stays and becomes like translucent, rather than tearing into a hole, that means it's ready. If it doesn't, that means it needs still more kneading. There we go. Even the stickies, you still need to flour your work surface. But the more you knead it, the less of a problem the sticking will be. It's another way that you know it's coming together. Oh yeah, okay. So, I know this is done because take my finger, press into the surface, and it bounced back. But we're also going to try, just in case, another window pane test. Maybe. There we go. Alright, I don't know how well the camera's going to pick this up, but there we go. See how I'm pulling it? It's only tearing a little bit at one corner. That's perfect. We also don't want to knead it too long, just in case. So once your dough is all ready, you're going to take a bowl. It's hard to see, but you're going to grease it. You're going to take your dough, gather it on up, plop it down one side, and then flip it over in the bowl so that the whole thing is greased. Tuck it in there, and a nice little bed for it. And now the waiting begins. So I've covered the greased bowl with my bread dough inside. I use plastic wrap, but you can use anything really. You can use a towel, even a damp towel. The idea is just keeping as much warmth and moisture in there as possible. Now for this first rise, you want to put it somewhere nice and warm, free of drafts, so not on a window or anything like that. You can put it on top of a fridge, you can put it on top of the oven, you can put it on top of a microwave, but if you happen to have an oven that has a light on the inside, you can just turn that light on, put your bread inside, do not turn on the oven at all, just leave the light on, and now we'll let it sleep for 1.5 to 2 hours until it has doubled in size. And we're back. It's been about 1.5 hours in the oven light on. You can definitely tell this bread is a lot bigger than it was. So this has definitely doubled in size, which is what we want. And the bowl is nice and warm. So what we're doing now is something called the punch down. It may seem counterintuitive because you've just made all this lovely air into your dough. But what you want to do is you want to roll it out and punch all that air back out of your dough because it's gonna have one more rise. So, make sure to flour our surface again. It will smell incredible. Just look at that, look how big this child is. Okay. All right. Ooh, so you can see it pulling away. It's nice and warm. You can see the bubbles coming out. Yes. Perfect. All right. Sorry about that. You've poured it out. Now just psh, psh, psh. You do just punch it. You want to punch out as much air as you can because you don't want to overprove dough. I've done it. It can happen. It'll make your bread super dense and very shallow, very short. Maybe sometime I'll show you a picture of that. Okay, it's nice and punched. So now you just kind of, let's see, here's what we're gonna do, because I've done this before. Just kind of roll it up a little bit, gather it. It's gonna be a little ornery here, you can see, but that's okay. There we go. Gather into a nice punched down ball there. Now you're gonna take a knife and cut it in half, because this recipe is for 2 loaves. There we go. Obviously it doesn't have to be completely in half, just kind of eyeball it. But if you can get it into much of an already sort of loafy shape like this, more the better, because you're gonna be putting it into a pan that's already that shape. So then kind of gather them into that loafy shape there. You're still gonna see bubbles on the surface. That's good. You can give those an extra punch if you want. I'm gonna do a secret, which is where you kind of give it a roll. Press on that corner there, gives it some nice stability. Now you should have 2 loaf pans in your kit that look just like this. No need to grease them or anything like that. Spoiler alert from the future, do grease your pans at least a little. You can see it kind of stuck a little bit around the edge for me. The loaves still came out, they just look a little shaggy, a little worse for wear, but they're still delicious. So yes, do grease your pan a little bit. If you're feeling fancy, throw on some butter and then toss a little bit of flour in there too. Yeah. Gather up your loaf. Plop it on in. There we go. And then do it with the other one. You can see this is how I'm making that little seal at the bottom. Kind of tuck it all in and then use your heel of your hand to push it down a little bit like an envelope. You don't have to do that though. I just do that because I used to make bread for a living. So it's kind of a habit now. But you get a nice firm loaf, good shape, pop it on in. There we go. And now you're gonna cover these as well and put them back in another warm spot. In my case, they're just gonna go right back into my oven with a light on. I know, bread takes a long time, but it's worth it. So you got another hour and a half, you know, maybe go play some games, maybe read a book even. All right, we'll see you back here when it'll be time to bake our loaves. And welcome back again for the dramatic reveal. There we go. All right, so these are Our loaves that have gone through their second proof, you can see they're a lot bigger. They puffed up. We still got some bubbles. You can see on the surface a little bit there too. It's looking real nice. So now we can put them in the oven. You're gonna preheat your oven to 375. That might take a while. This, my oven took maybe 20 minutes or so. So just make sure to give enough time. Maybe start it preheating when you do the second rise, just so you don't run the risk of having your loaves proof for too long. So now we can just put them in the oven. Ideally, don't film it while you do. We've got 2 loaves. Loaf number 1. All right. Now those are gonna hang out in there for 30 to 35 minutes. Start with 30 because you can always bake them for a little longer if you need to, but you can't unbake them. So here's the home stretch of our waiting. We'll come back to hopefully some beautifully baked loaves. Okay, it has been 32 minutes. I did 30 and then I checked it and I thought it needed just another 2 more minutes. But I think everything is set. Watching away that heat there. All right, make sure you get a pad. Now there's 2 ways to check and see if your bread is done. If you've got a thermometer, you can stab it into the side and check the temperature. I never really do that. But the other way is if you knock on it and it sounds hollow. This might be a little, okay. There we go. Not sure if that transferred, but it kind of sounds like a knocking on the door, which means we are good to go. So, let's see if I can get there we go. Whoop. Ideally, if you've got a cooling rack or something similar, that's the best. But you can also just, as long as you get them out of the oven, then you're good. If I can. Also, maybe having a better oven mitt. Haha. All right, make sure you've got your butter handy. We're gonna let these cool for just a couple minutes, not for very long, because you definitely want to cut them open when they're warm, but just let them hang out for just a sec, and then we'll get these onto plates, and then we can cut them open. And then we can slice them, I should say. And we're back. About 2 minutes or so later, we've got not 1, but 2 loaves of bread. You can see they turn a little shaggy, like I warned in the past future, because I did not grease the pans. I was foolish. I thought I could bake them without it, but everybody makes mistakes, even experienced bakers like myself. So what you're gonna wanna do is get yourself a serrated edge knife, if you can. Really, you just want a knife that's very sharp. Butter knife is not a good idea because it's gonna squish down the bread and it's not gonna cut very well. So, you got that bread, take that knife, nice and slow. Bam. You can't see it, but there is some beautiful steam coming off of this bread. Got my butter ready to go. Grab yourself a slab and let it just melt on there. At least a little. There we go. Sort of. I've just got butter. Obviously you can put whatever you want. You can put jam, honey, jelly, apple butter, that kind of thing. But now we take our taste. It shows up okay. It's really good. Best part is the cold saltiness of the butter with the bread, which is just a little bit kind of sweetish. There we go. I hope you enjoy your freshly baked bread that you made, that you have created. and I hope you enjoy it with whatever you want. And we will see you in the next installment of our Teen Tillamook County Library Bake-Along. Have a great day.